welcome back, y'all. This is another episode of She, Her, Dyke. Today I don't have my co-hosts with me because they busy. They booked and busy. But we got a special guest, Dr. Plummer, who is a therapist, a queer therapist at that. And yeah, we're just gonna chop it up about mental health today. Let's start up. Tell me about you. I know you was in the military. You're a therapist. You're married. So we got a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
So how did you start? How did you get into mental health?
It's so much to talk about. Yeah, I got into mental health. I guess the real story is I got into mental health because my mama is crazy. But I grew up around a whole bunch of people, and I was just kind of like, I wonder how people make these decisions, right? Like some people seem like they live in life and they're making the decisions that feels good for them, and some people seem like they're not. And so as a little kid, I was probably in elementary school, and I wanted to understand how the mind worked and how people made certain decisions that they made. Back in the day, though, coming from like the hood and stuff, you only got a couple options, right? Like you're going to be a lawyer or a doctor or something like that.
Right. Where are you from?
I'm from Los Angeles. I'm originally from Los Angeles, and then I moved out to San Bernardino in the Inland Empire. Yeah,
Gotcha.
So shout out to my IE folks listening. But I was like, oh, I'm supposed to be a lawyer, and I was interested in that. I think very structured and in patterns and things like that. So being a lawyer would have been easy for me, but I wanted to study the mind. So then I was thinking, well, maybe I could do forensic psychology because there's this crazy story real quick. So in LA, back in the day, there was this serial killer named Richard Ramirez. And I didn't know what serial killers were. But I had refused to eat cereal. And my mom was like, what's wrong with cereal? And I was like, the serial killer gonna get me. And then she was like, that's not how this works. Took me to the library, started realizing that there's a difference between cereal, like what you eat, and cereal, like a series of actions. And that's when I started understanding about like forensic psychology. So there started to be a name for what I wanted to do. And so I did. I went over to Howard. I came from
HU? All right.
No, I left California, lived with my dad in Seoul, Korea for a couple years, then lived with him again in Mililani, Hawaii, which is where I graduated high school, and then came out to DC to go to Howard. And I originally was studying justice because, again, forensic psychology, possibly law, and got into counseling. And I've been rocking and rolling in counseling and mental health ever since then.
That's what's up. Yeah. So how long has it been? How long have you been counseling?
Oh my goodness, you trying to make me tell everybody how old I am. Oh my God, I see where we're going today.
Okay, all right, we gotta go there. I was just wondering.
I've been in the mental health field since 2004, so 16 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you're a veteran out here. Okay.
I am, and have had so many wonderful experiences. Even had an experience with the Army where I was able to counsel soldiers and their families. So wonderful, wonderful experiences in mental health.
So you were in the Army?
Yeah. I was in the Army for 8 years. Wow. And my dad is also in the Army, or was in the Army. So both of us are veterans. And at one point, there was an intersection between my counseling degree and being a veteran. And so when my soldiers deployed, I stayed behind because I was pregnant with my son, and they let me counsel. And they were like, hey, counsel these families. It was really unusual. It was kind of like a pilot program because that's when we were first starting to do family counseling by video with soldiers who were deployed. And so it was something new, innovative, but it was super fun, and we made it work. And we noticed that those families were able to remain intact once the soldier came back home, because a lot of soldiers and their families have major rifts during deployment, and they don't always be able to make it back to a sense of normality or normalcy when they return back home. But those families were able to do that because they had been getting support the whole time while they were deployed.
That's what's up. I'm really excited about this interview because I have a podcast that's based upon, queer masculine women, the LGBT community. And, they're always reaching out, talking about mental health issues. What can I do, about this, or how can I find a therapist or whatever. So my first question would be, what would you recommend for LGBTQ people to find another LGBT friendly or LGBT therapist? Like, how can they go about searching for one, and also like how can they get one if they don't have health insurance?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's interesting is that in the mental health field, there's so many platforms in terms of how to find a therapist. It's just that most people don't know what the platforms are. So the platforms that we advertise on are Psychology Today and Therapy for Black Girls and goodtherapy.com. We're on a lot of other platforms too, like college-based platforms like Thriving Campus and things like that. But on those platforms, they give a selection process where you can ask for certain types of therapists. So let's take Psychology Today. I should actually be a brand ambassador for them because I'm always talking about them. So
that's how I found my therapist. So yeah.
So I'm like, okay, let me go into Psychology Today. You put in the zip code of where you live or where you want to see the counselor. It may be closer to your job, if it's post-COVID, or maybe closer to your house, whatever the case may be. Put in the zip code, and once you put on the zip code, on the left side, it gives all of this criteria. So you can find a woman, you can find a man, you can find particular insurance, you can find types of issues. You can also click on their sexual orientation preference. And in there, you're going to see counselors who say that they are either part of the LGBTQ community or that they are aligned with the LGBTQ community. But let me tell you something real quick. Just because somebody says they're aligned doesn't always mean that they're aligned. So you got to be willing to get on the call with them or send them a quick email and ask them certain questions. Questions that you should be asking them are you part of the community, right? How many clients have you worked with in the community? Would those clients identify that they had success in therapy? What kind of issues have you addressed in working with clients in the community? Because the thing is, most people, we interview our doctors, right? We don't just go to a doctor and just let them look all up on our body and stuff, but we don't always interview our therapists. But we need to be interviewing our therapists. We need to be asking them the questions that are relevant because we're going to be telling them all of our secrets, all of our deep, dark thoughts. We're going to be telling them about all of our traumas or, all of our goals. And so you have to interview them. You can't just take them at face value right away. Any therapist that does not want to have a free consultation or does not want to have an interview with you is someone you should be leery about, because if they really care, they could set aside 5 to 10 minutes to have a conversation with you. Then during the conversation, one should be paying attention to their intuition. Are you feeling good while you're listening to this person? Are you not feeling so good? Are you like, I don't know if I really believe them? If you don't believe them, don't try them out. Go to somebody else. And many therapists offer sliding scales for people who don't have insurance. And so you could go that route. But then there's also companies
like... Well, what's a sliding scale? Like, what do you mean? Like they'll set up like a payment option or... Okay.
Yeah, because different therapists charge different rates based off of what's happening, what's trending in that area. But they're also setting up rates based off of their education, the number of years of experience they have, what's going on and all that kind of stuff. If you're on a sliding scale, though, you can start as low as whatever the client says that they can afford, and then gradually increase. So some clients may say, I can only afford $10 a session. The counselor will decide if that's okay with them or if it's not. And then they have a conversation from there. But there's other companies like Still Smiling, which is based out of Pittsburgh, but they support people across the nation. But they subsidize sessions, so they will pay for the sessions for our clients for a number of weeks and things like that. So there's lots of companies like that. So what you do is you research mental health subsidies, or you research mental health free services, and some of these agencies will come up. They can also reach out to Onyx, and we can help them with that process too, because we know quite a few companies that will pay for clients' mental health for a number of sessions, maybe like 8 or 10 sessions. People can also hit up their EAPs, even if they don't have an insurance company that they like. And those are for folks that are like working and have that kind of option. For folks that are not working, then again, there's all these free options that are available to them as well.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Cool. That was very informational. So hopefully y'all get to doing your research, find you a good therapist, because I think now is definitely the time. You know, everything going on. You got the pandemic. You got seasonal depression. So definitely need to do what you got to do for your, mental health.
And not just that, but this is the holiday time. And when we are folks in the community, we don't always get to go home. We don't always get to go and see our family. We don't always get to go see our friends. Some of us look very different than what we did when we were younger. You know, I was listening to one of your other podcasts the other day. Gosh, I can't remember who you had on there, but you guys were talking about just basically masculinity within the community. And some folk, and I think one of you guys were talking about your parents made y'all wear dresses and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
And so now nobody's coming home wearing dresses, right? Like everybody wearing what they want to wear. And so sometimes that makes it difficult to even go home for the holidays. And then we're talking about COVID and isolation and what that does to the brain. And, then we're talking about this upcoming what's it called? You know, I'm married now and I can't even think of it anymore. Like the cuffing season. What's it called when people?
Oh yeah, cuffing season. That's right. That's what it's called.
Yeah. Okay. See, I know something. I didn't lose all of my stuff yet. But all of that stuff is it's even more complicated in our community. And so this time of the year happens to be the most challenging for mental health in the LGBTQ community. So we see a real big increase in folks reaching out to us around this time of year.
I do have a question. So now that everything is like virtual, so in order to find a therapist, do they still have to be in your area, or have y'all opened it up to where y'all can accept clients from other states?
Yeah. So there's a particular credential. We don't have to get into all of that, but there's a credential related to telemental health, and that people should have that. But even with that credential, you still have to be within your state. So you don't necessarily have to be in the same city, but we get licensed by our state. And so you can't work outside of the state because each state has different laws around how to practice therapy and what's legally responsible and things like that. So you still got to kind of find somebody in your state. Places that like Onyx, our clinicians are licensed in multiple states. So we may be, my Maryland folks may be based in Maryland, but have a license in Maryland, a license in DC, a license in Pennsylvania, a license in Minnesota, a license in Georgia. It depends on wherever they want to get licensed. And if they're licensed in that state, then you can see them. So we can have a client from Atlanta and we're up here. As long as we're licensed in Georgia, we're good.
Oh, got you. Okay. Cool. The next thing, since we're talking about depression or, seasonal family holidays, what coping mechanisms would you suggest, for people just trying to, get through the holidays?
Yeah, I think one of the big things in our community, especially for folks who are out, and that's a whole nother topic, right? Like we could talk about what that means to be out and the mental health related to that. But I think that one, it's important to always be authentic. The more authentic you are, the more congruency you have with your brain. Otherwise, you create a sense of dissonance, and dissonance means that the two things don't add up. They're not making sense, and that causes people's mental health to split. So the first thing is to always remain authentic to yourself, especially if you have the space to be authentic. And sometimes people don't have the opportunity or the privilege to be authentic. But then some of my most basic coping mechanisms that I have for folks are to pay attention to their five senses. Remember our five senses we learned in elementary school. So like what you see, what you hear, what you taste, what you touch, things like that. To pay attention to their five senses and to always do something that's helpful for that. So aromatherapy is perfect, right? In terms of calming your brain. There's actual neurological science behind aromatherapy in terms of what it does to the brain and how it calms it down. So if we're paying attention to our senses, there'll be senses related to aroma or to smell. So what are you doing that helps with your smell? What calms you down? What do you need to smell? Then there'll be things related to what you see. What are you watching? What are you paying attention to? Are you watching too much stuff on Instagram? Is it causing you to be comparison to other people? Is it causing you to be frustrated and angry? What are you tasting? There's certain things that we shouldn't be eating if we have complicated mental health issues. For instance, we shouldn't be eating things that are really spicy because two major.
I love spicy food.
Listen, let me tell you. And you can eat your spicy food, but don't eat it on the day that you feeling extra depressed or extra anxious, because chemicals that are for our brain, like dopamine and serotonin, are actually stored in our gut. They're not stored in our brain. So they travel up from our gut through our bloodstream into our brain. If you're eating things that are super spicy, it actually represses the chemicals, and it doesn't allow them to be reduced or be extended out. So that means that if you're eating something spicy, you're probably not going to be as happy the rest of the evening. Or if you're eating something super salty, you're probably not going to be as happy because your body is trying to adjust to what you just ate, and it doesn't allow for those hormones to be released. So what you?
I didn't know that. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how I don't know if you want to keep this light or if you want to get real science. Because listen, I got all the science behind all this stuff. But so yeah, pay attention to your five senses. I also think that it's important for people to get fresh air throughout the day, and that's especially important while we're in COVID. We have to open our windows every once in a while, or like I see with you, have plants around our house, because the plants give off fresh oxygen, but also opening our windows get freshness in our house. It's cold here in DC at different points, but I keep my back door open for at least an hour a day, because that gives us fresh air in the house, fresh air kind of circulating, and it causes us to want to stand by the door, which makes us have to calm down for a little bit too. So people should open their window for at least 20 to 30 minutes a day and sit by the window so that they're getting some fresh air. Sit by the plants. We have a lot of plants in our house now. I think we have like 15 plants.
I got like 50.
And I'm trying to get there. My wife is over me though. She won't let me have any more plants. My mother-in-law gave me some plants for Thanksgiving, and my wife almost had a heart attack. And I was like, girl, sit down. We're going to get these plants because we're going to breathe right, and we're going to have this good mental health. But
period.
She be trying to play me. But, yeah, and paying attention to what we touch too. So, Black folks, we don't always have the best relationship with our body. Sometimes when we were growing up, our bodies were sensationalized and sometimes sexualized, like, don't wear that outfit, people gonna be looking at you, don't do this, don't do that. But sometimes we need to get reconnected with our body. So what I ask my clients to do when it comes to touch is to take the time, how long it takes for them to put on lotion or oil, and to get connected. So be mindful about how your hand is touching your arm, how it's touching your forearm, how it's touching your leg. It forces you to slow down, but it also forces you to connect with your body. This part of your body is connecting with that part of your body, and that's how you get into touch. When you are paying attention to touch, again, it has a neurological sensation. So which means that it's calming you down. So even in those moments. Right now, though, because we don't always like the way our bodies look, or we've been sexualized, or whatever the case may be, we move so fast that we don't even pay attention to the fact that we are touching ourselves. And we said to other people, my love language is touch, but we won't touch ourselves, right? We just put on this oil and this lotion so fast, and we miss out on the experience of connecting with ourselves. So I guess that's a long answer to your question, but paying attention, the easiest ways to cope is to pay attention to your natural body and your five senses, and making sure you're doing things that are supportive of those five senses. Everything else is extra and positive, like crystals and going for walks and having therapy and, things like that. But the easiest things you can do daily are connecting to those five senses in a very intentional way.
Okay, so basically, be nice to yourself, guys. Like, love on yourself. Candle Day was yesterday. I hope y'all racked up on candles. Yeah, that's definitely, because I feel like people don't pay attention. Like, I think they absorb everything from around them, and they don't pay attention to what they can do for themselves. And that's really important. So yeah, be nice to yourself. Period, y'all.
Yeah,
that's important. The next question I had was, how can I put this? When it comes to how do you create a safe space for like you and your partner, you and your friends to like talk about your mental health issues? How would you recommend someone tell their partner like, hey, this is what I'm going through, or what kind of boundaries should they put up?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question is, are you actually in a relationship with somebody that you feel safe with? because sometimes we're in relationships with people just because it looks good or because we think that is matching or because this is a person well known in the community and we want to be in this group or in that group. Sometimes we're not in relationships with people that we feel safe with. And so the first thing is to assess, do you feel safe with the person? If you can't tell your partner something, if your hesitation is like a boulder and you can't tell your partner something, it may indicate that there's some challenges with you in terms of your communication skills, but it may also be an indication that this is not the best partner for you. And you have to be able to make that decision. Of course, we help a lot with that in therapy, helping people go through their decision making process related to their relationship choices, their relationship experiences, etc. The same goes for friends. When we were in school, and I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but when we're in school, they teach us about math and science and English and writing, etc. But they don't teach us about social skills the way that they should. Like, how do you identify who's a good friend? How do you identify who's a good partner? How do you identify what you need as a person and subsequently choose people who are aligned with that? So that's where the therapy helps because we get to like restructure some of our old experiences or we get to fill in some of the gaps of what people didn't actually teach us. But going back to your original question, when it's time to tell somebody that you are struggling with mental health issues, then it does require a courageous conversation. What I would encourage people to do is to make sure that they are as calm as they can before that. So that means get out as much energy as they could, maybe go for a walk, go for a run, do some push-ups, do some sit-ups, like expel the energy so that their body is calm, have some water with them, and plan out ahead of time. I know it sounds like schoolwork, but plan out ahead of time what you want to say. So maybe have 3 main items that you want to say to the person in terms of, I'm not feeling well, things haven't been right since whatever time. I don't really know how to adjust or move forward. I don't have a solution in place right now, or I do have a solution in place, and this is what I need from you. So identifying what's going on, identifying how you're feeling about it and what the solutions are, and then letting your friend or your partner know what you need from them. Because the worst thing to do is to hear or see that one of your friends is suffering and you don't know how to respond to it. And so sometimes it's our onus when we're communicating that to let somebody know what we need from them. If you don't know what you need, you may say, I don't know what I need right now, but I want to be able to engage in a conversation with you so you can help me out with this. But it does require a lot of courage. But
right, especially in the Black community, I think we're getting better, but you still have people who are kind of just like, oh, you got what you mean, you depressed, and so I think it's kind of hard to kind of come out and be like, look, I actually struggle with this, or I'm bipolar, or whatever it is. So and it's also on the other end, like if I'm the friend and you telling me, about your mental health, I think it's important that you just listen and be comforting. I don't think it's because somebody asked like, what ways can they make their partner feel comfortable about talking to them about it, and I'm like, just listen. I suppose.
Yeah, just listen and not judge, right? Like the fact if you're the receiver of the information, if you're the friend and somebody is telling you, then they're trusting you with this information, right? So your response has to be one that's encouraging or one that's full of empathy. You could, even if you don't understand a lick of depression, you could say something like, okay, I'm here for you, or we'll figure this out together, or, just continue to talk to me about it. You don't have to say like, I understand, or I lived that life too, unless you did. And then you say that. So, which brings me to another point. I know depression and all of that stuff real well. You know what I mean? Like my great grandmother committed suicide when I was 19. My mom had depression really bad. I've struggled with depression and we see some signs of it every once in a while in my daughter as well. So it's here. It's not like we could kind of get away from depression or anxiety. It's just a matter of addressing it head on so that you can resolve it. Because if you keep pushing it to the side and pretending that it's not there, then it's going to get worse and worse. It's going to snowball. Depression is mental health. Anxiety is mental health. The same way if you have an infection in your body, if you don't address the infection is going to spread, and it's going to spread and spread and spread until it causes some some life altering consequences. The same with our mental health. In the Black community, we just don't always see it that way. We think, that's just in my mind, so I could put that off to the side. I could compartmentalize that. But you can't. It's gonna show up everything. It's gonna show up in the way you spend money. It's gonna show up in who you decide to be in a relationship with. It's gonna show up with your decisions. It's gonna show up, with your spirituality. It's gonna show up, and it is gonna show up. So you gotta address it as soon as you know that it's happening.
Right. My next question. So you talked about your personal experience with health, or mental health. Did you get a therapist, or like or you just tackled it on, head on, or were you able to walk yourself through it during that time? You were
Honey, I see my therapist every Tuesday morning. Stop playing with me. I know her, and I'm not gonna tell all y'all her name because y'all gonna try to get on her books and then take up all her time, and I'm not gonna be able to see her on Tuesdays. But okay. When I was in school, so I got my undergraduate degree from Howard, but I got my graduate degree, my master's from Howard as well. And Howard's program was great because what it did, one of our requirements was that it forced us to go to counseling. That was like an assignment. We had to go to counseling so we could understand what it was like to be a client, because it's not easy to be a client. It's not easy sitting across from a stranger and telling them all of your business, right? Especially as a Black person, when our family told us, keep this business in the house. You know what I mean? Don't air out, don't do this and that. So sitting across from a stranger is difficult. But because Howard is Black and it was culturally responsive, it wanted us to kind of get out of that and go into counseling ourselves. So I went to counseling that first time, had an amazing, amazing experience, learned so much about myself, addressed so many things that happened in my childhood and that was happening in my adulthood, really transformed my life, because at that time I was also, my oldest child was being born. And so I was able to readjust and get rid of some of those, and to break some of those cycles that my parents, my mother and my maternal side had really instilled in me. I was able to break it because I had gone to therapy. And so my daughter is totally different she's had totally different experiences than I did. And then when after I got pregnant with my son, 7 months after his birth, I had a late onset of postpartum depression. Wow. And I knew it. And keep in mind that I'm a therapist at both of these times, but I knew it because I knew the symptoms, right? And I got back into therapy and was rocking with her. Had an amazing experience with her. I think at that point I only was in therapy for 6 months, but I was able to address it really quickly. And then what's crazy is, so I had taken a break from therapy for a while, but when I got married to my wife, I was like, oh crap, I could potentially sabotage this relationship, right? I know how to be a mom. I know how to be a business person. I know how to be a therapist. I know how to do all of these things. I don't know how to be a wife. And I didn't really have role modeling around that. Not anything that I was proud of. So I went back to therapy because I was like, I don't want to sabotage my relationship with my wife. So let me go back into therapy and all of that good stuff. And
that's another question. A lot of people wanted to know, would you recommend, I guess, therapy for couples before they get married? Not necessarily if they have an issue, but
Yeah. Absolutely. When you first realize that you're in love with somebody, baby, you need to be in therapy, right? When y'all just kicking it or whatever, but when you realize that you're in love, go ahead and get a little bit of therapy. I mean, what's 1 hour a week? What's 1 hour every 2 weeks? That's nothing, right? To be able to just make sure that y'all are on the same path, right? Don't we take classes before we take big tests, right? Don't we, if you're studying for a major exam in your career, don't you get a study partner? Don't you have somebody to kind of practice that stuff with? Yeah, why not? Why not let that therapist be that person for you? It doesn't mean that anything is wrong. It means that you're being preventative. It means that you're addressing things head on. It's better to go ahead and air out all of that stuff in that relationship when you guys are still fresh and dating than to get into a marriage situation. And then you trying to figure it out at that point. Lesbians, we're known for U-hauling and stuff like that, right?
Real quick.
You married to somebody, you've known them for 3 months, and all of a sudden y'all married. You know what I mean? And now you're trying to figure things out. No, go ahead and get the counseling first, and find a therapist who is familiar with couples in the LGBTQ community, because there's not a whole lot, but there are some that are out there. And some of our issues in our couples are the same as heterosexual folk, and some are different, right? Especially when you start putting in like gender roles and femininity versus masculinity and children and in-laws and coming out traumas and things like that. And all of that stuff will manifest in the relationship. So it's good to have somebody who's familiar with those experiences and terms, and then they can help you navigate some of that stuff.
Okay, cool. And I also want to ask you about your experience as being, you know, a queer woman. You said you didn't know how to be a wife, you're a parent. You know, I guess well, let's start with this. Like, how did you explain to your kids about your sexuality? You know, how did that how did that go?
Listen, they were like, "Wait, what, girl? What you talking about?" So we live in DC. We live in DC, and in the DC area, and so for their whole lives, they only knew me dating men. So they were like, you know, because I broke up with their father when my son was just a few months old. And so you know, I would date here and date there and things like that. So they were comfortable with that. But they grew up in an area where there were lots of gay people around, lots of queer people, lots of lesbians, you know, bisexual folks, everything. So it wasn't really a big thing. They were fine with seeing that in the community. They would ask questions and things like that, and I just answer the questions. My daughter so I just came out, right? I hate this term, but I'm using my little air quotes. I came out just about almost 7 years ago. So I was a grown woman, with like grown. But I was dating somebody and I was like, okay, I'm ready to like make this public news, you know, etc. I was established. I felt comfortable in myself. And I was like, I'm gonna just do it. Told my daughter and she was pissed. But not I came out, she was pissed because she said that I held a secret. She was like, all these years you knew that you was like this and you
was lying the whole time.
You just over here dating these men, thinking that that's what it is, and this whole time you know you want to date these women too. Like, why are you playing these games, right? And I was dating the women too, but I didn't know about that. And so that was her reaction. After she got over the fact that she felt that she had been deceived, she was perfectly fine. She was like, okay, you know, it's cool, it's whatever. Right now, she's the one who is always talking about how, you know, her two moms and things like that. So they're both really great with it. My son, when I told him, he was a bit younger, they're 3 years apart, and he was just like, okay, I don't care. Is this person going to be a cheerleader or not? Because I just, you know, we don't need no drama is basically how it came. Like, is this person going to be a cheerleader? And when I was about to break up with that person, he was one of the ones like, she's not being your cheerleader anymore, so I don't know if I like this anymore, right?
You gotta go.
What's up, right? Like, what we going to do here? And so they've always been super supportive. They're actually the ones that walked me down the aisle, gave me away to my wife. They're all about family. There was one point recently in recent year where we were worried or concerned if our son was embarrassed by what was happening, embarrassed by our life, because he wasn't bringing all his friends around. He's also an introvert, but he wasn't bringing his friends around. So we were like, oh my God, he's probably embarrassed. And I think my wife said something to him like, you know, do you have any friends that are, you know, gay, lesbian, queer, whatever? He was like, what are you talking about? Such and such is a lesbian. Like, oh, listen, we done posted the picture of the little girl in the pictures and stuff. Like, she done been around the house and everything. We just didn't know that she was a girl because that's not anything that they talked about, and that's not how she presents to the world. She just showed up with her mama and everything. We thought that she was just, you know, one of the fellas. But she is. She's a boy with a, you know, like a boy with an eye, how she identifies herself. We just didn't know. So we were like, oh, okay, like, he's not ashamed. Like, he's just being private. You know what I mean? Because we were worried, like, man, we hope he's not ashamed about us as he's navigating life. Instead, he like, y'all playing games. This is one of my homeboys. Like, this is how we move. This is what we doing. So I was like, all right.
So you said you came out later in life. What I know that had to be tough because you said you're a grown woman. And what kind of was like the breaking point? Like, okay, this is what I'm gonna just let people know because I know you probably contemplated about it. So what kind of gave you that push? Like, all right, this is it.
The same way that I said that we started off here, being authentic. I mean, I'm like, how am I telling my clients to be authentic and live their real life, and I'm hiding something that's important to me? Let me be clear. The homies knew. Okay. My closest cousins knew. My parents knew. My parents they thought it was still a phase. I was like, I don't know how you in the phase for like 30 something years, but
because they be holding on to that.
You know how people over here kissing when they like in elementary school and they like doing their first kiss and stuff. They finding me behind the church kissing some little girl and they pretending like they don't know what's going on. You know what's going on here. Stop playing games. But it really became a fact that I was not living authentically. And I am extremely spiritual. Extremely spiritual. I spend a lot of time with God. And I kept feeling like, I know God did not make me this way to make me like suffer. I know I'm not supposed to be like hiding. Like, I have so much to offer the world. And if I could just be 100% myself, then it's going to be okay. Right. So I did. And let me tell you, my life has been the abundance of my life has expanded so much since I came out. And it kind of felt like God was just like, I have so many gifts for you. I just need you to be the real you and stop being afraid of what everybody is saying. And that's really important for me to highlight because sometimes the church has turned us away from God. And so there's so many of us in the community that don't mess with the church anymore because we like the church is not about us. But the church is different than God. And God is the one who was like, go ahead and be you. And once I made that decision, like I'm gonna just live my true self, then I've had tons of blessings. There was a point though that I felt like I was back in the closet though, because I actually identify as bisexual, even though I'm married to my wife and will forever and always be married to my wife and love my wife. I think that there was a point where I was only identifying as lesbian because bisexuality is not supported in either community. Both communities act like bi folks are like the plague, right? And so I found myself back in the closet. And about a year or so ago, I told my wife, like, I can't keep looking. She knew how I identified from the very beginning, had her discomfort around it. But I was like, I can't keep pretending because there's so many bi people who need to hear my story. There's so many bi people who need to know it's okay to be bi. Yeah, you might get discriminated in both communities, but you still got to be authentic to who you are. And so I guess I came out twice, if you will, as a femme. I probably come out far more than my wife or people who are more masculine, because I don't look like I would be with a woman, and so people often are on the edge of saying something inappropriate, and I have to tell them, right? Not have to. I will tell them like this is my wife, and my wife talks. She teases because she's like, you're so proud all the time. There's so many people who are still ashamed. You know, they may have a wife or they may have a husband, the guys may have a husband or whomever, and they're still so ashamed about it. But not me. I'm just kind of like I was
what it is.
So long, like this is what it is. My family's okay. My children are fine. These people not paying my bills, and I got bills, honey, and they not paying that one of them. So we good.
Sure. Yeah, I think this is a misconception that bi people, they, I guess, play both, dip and dabble at the same time. But like you said, you committed to your wife. You always gonna be with your wife. But your truth is that you're bisexual. Yep. That don't mean that you having sex with men at the same time.
Exactly.
Unless that's the arrangement y'all got. But
no, honey, that is not the arrangement we got. I am married to a Sagittarian. It ain't nothing like that allowed.
Enough said. You could have left it at Sagittarius. Enough said. Yeah, but that I think a lot of people just kind of get caught up in that. And I guess for lesbians, they kind of feel like insecure about it. Like, oh, you like men too. I'm not a man. So I think it's cool that you kind of standing in your truth, like this is what it is, and that's pretty dope. Mm-hmm. My next question was, when you came out to your friends or just in general, were you ashamed or it was just like Like, how did people respond to it?
Hell no, I wasn't ashamed. What about me look like I'm ashamed? The moment I made the decision that I was coming out, I was like, there's nothing to be ashamed about. And I am usually a relatively bold person. So I think that most of my friends were like, so similar to my daughter, like, so you haven't said anything this whole time? Like, you bold out here, you wearing this bright lipstick, you doing this thing, you show up in the world however you want to show up, and you haven't been saying anything? Like, they were more concerned about me. Like, are you okay? Like, how did that happen for so long, you know?
Okay.
And so most of my friends were fine. But listen, I was a little trifling with what I did. I posted a picture on Facebook. It was like, this is my girlfriend.
So that's how you just dropped it on them. Boom. This is what it is.
My daddy called me like, oh, yo, cousins and aunties and grand aunties blowing up my phone. And, you know, my friends from high school and from middle school and stuff, they like, girl, what you talking about? Like,
they probably kind of like, girl, Dr. Plummer over here.
And then some of my friends was like, girl, why you just now telling everybody? Because you remember such and such. And I was like, don't be saying that I remember nothing because you putting my stuff out there now. Be quiet. Close your mouth. Close your mouth. But no, I think that I had more support than not. I think my biological mom had some issues with it, but she has she's part of the reason that I came into mental health. You know, I'm very curious around her thought process and decision making. As a therapist now, I know that it was because she experienced a lot of trauma and that kind of shifted what happened with her brain and stuff. But she got over it, and my daddy is supportive. My daddy is always talking about how much he loves my wife, and you know, he buys her Christmas gifts and birthday gifts, and he's up here, he visits us often. And this is just his family. So as long as my kids and my close family was fine, I was fine. The homies, like I said, they already knew, so they were just happy that they didn't have to keep no secrets, right? Like they was just like, okay, like we could just all be out in public now. And I still have tons of straight friends. You know, some people in the community, they only have people, their friends are only people that are in the community. But I still have tons of straight friends and tons of friends in the community. And everybody vibes well. You know, everybody is good with it. I recognize it's unusual, and I think part of it is because I was older when I came out, so I was already established as a person. People already knew my character. They already knew my decision-making process. They already knew where I was responsible. So my sexuality wasn't a distraction. The same way that sometimes it is when folks are young.
Okay.
Yeah.
One more question, because we recently had someone write in. Is there oh, okay. We recently had someone write in who basically just came out. They're 32. They have 2 kids. And I guess my question to you is, did you have any issues with like your partners, like with you having kids or with you not being out at the moment when you know, right before you dating before you came out?
Yeah. Yeah, I did.
Was it more so just like, I know, like, was it more about the kids or was it more so about you not being out, or both maybe?
You know, it was probably, I think this is the first time that I'm actually like thinking about it in detail like that. I wonder if it had to do with the fact that I had that their father is active in our lives. So he is my co-parent, and he is still one of my good friends. We just didn't work, and it makes sense now why it didn't work, right? I needed to be with my wife. I needed to be with the ladies. But I think it was that. I think it was more so like their father is active and present, and he's not that kind of like rah kind of guy. Like, this is my space. This, you know, this was my woman. These are my children. He's not that kind of guy. He's very easygoing. And so I think that threw people off a little bit. Like, so he's not a deadbeat dad. He's not a jerk. You know, he's not over here trying to like take over my space and things like that. Because he knew from when we were in college. So it wasn't like it was a surprise to him or anything. He was just like, when you gonna tell the kids? So it wasn't anything like major like that. I think it was more so that he was present. I also think it was interesting because I am the parent, right? So even in our triangle that we have right now with me and their dad and my wife, I'm the final decision maker. And my thought behind that is those kids lived in my body and I got the C-section scars to prove it. So nobody is going to tell me how to, do this and this and that. Probably not fair, but it is what it is in our dynamic. So I think sometimes it was difficult for women to come in because they didn't know what their role was. Like, am I a mom? Am I a girlfriend? Am I a stepmom? Like, what's my actual role? Am I, from the people that I dated that was far more masculine, like, am I like more of a father like figure?
Right.
Like they were trying to figure out what their role was in this dynamic because me and the kid's father were still parenting and we were still friends. So I think that's what it was. It was less about that. My wife jokes sometimes that if my kids were younger, she don't know if she would have gave me the time of day because my kids are big now. But she's just a hater.
No, that's important. That's important. Like, I'm trying to sleep through the night. I don't want to hear your 2-year-old. That's important. I feel her on that.
And they were big when she met them, but she was just like, if I had to run around here and do this and that, I don't know if I could do it. Partially because she doesn't have any biological kids, and she wanted to date. She wanted to date her partner, and you can't always. It's hard to sometimes date when the kids are small because they need so much and they have such harsh routines, right? Like they got to be in bed at a certain time, they got to get bathed at a certain time, and so the spontaneity of like dating is not always present when the kids are smaller. So it does make it challenging for folks who have younger kids, but it's still doable. I mean, you just got to date somebody who's going to be flexible with you, and who is going to be okay with it. But it's doable. It's just an additional nuance that we have to address head on. And if you don't, it causes mental health issues because now people are stressed and people don't feel like they get to do what they want to do. They're not getting the love that they want and the attention. They're regretting their decisions. You got to address it head on. You can't just hope it away or pray it away. As spiritual as I am, faith without works is dead, right? Like you got to do something. And so, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, how has your experience been as, being a bisexual parent? What issues have you had, if any? How do you and your wife kind of navigate that?
Yeah, me and my wife navigate parenting in such interesting ways. My wife is a Trini to the bone, right? She's from Trinidad. And although we look alike, we're both brown skinned with these locks. We're very different culturally. She's very Caribbean, and so she has very Caribbean ways and expectations. And I'm Black American, and I'm also a therapist. So my job is in human development. You know what I mean? My job is in how the brain works and adolescents. And both of our kids right now are teenagers. We have a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old. So we just in the middle of some shit. But we're navigating it. Sexuality doesn't play a role in our parenting as much now because the kids just see us as their parent figures. They call her by her name. Her name is Megs. They call her Megs, but that's because that's what she wanted to be called. She didn't want to be called anything else. When they're being like extra sentimental, they'll call her Mama Megs or something like that. But they give her like Mother's Day gifts and all that kind of stuff because she's their mother and she is their disciplinarian as well, and she's their nurturer as well, and she's their provider as well. So they give her the same respect. She doesn't think that they give her the same respect, but I think it's just because I'm their biological mother and I've been with them longer. But no, to me it works out fine. I think our annoyances are in those moments where she's really angry with them and doesn't have the words to kind of let them know that they made her upset. But that's not a sexuality thing. That's more of a that's just not how you were raised kind of way. I guess it could be about gender because women are not always raised to express their feelings. People say that we are, but oftentimes we don't express our feelings because people don't take them seriously. They say men don't express their feelings, but they do. They just express it in a way that is more socially acceptable. So I guess that's it in terms of the full dynamics. By having their father in their life, we do different types of holidays and stuff together. So like Father's Day, we'll all celebrate together. birthdays, like we all celebrate together. But we've worked for this. It's not something that just came. Like it was conversations, it was logistics, it was, details, it was everybody being honest with their feelings. Like we work. So sometimes I just recently posted a Thanksgiving picture with all of us together and people are like, this is beautiful. And I'm like, but we worked for this. This wasn't just something that just magically happened. We did the hard work and now we're at this place. And it works. It works for us. So, but in terms of the kids and me being a bisexual, I have conversations with them about sexuality. My dad was super open with me about sexuality and sex as well. So, we just talk about what their preferences are, what their orientations are, how they navigate, how they present to the world. And we just have all those conversations. I'm not afraid to have conversations with my kids because they're my kids. Like, who else is going to have the conversation? I don't trust that all these people out in the world can have the conversations with my kids. So even though it's uncomfortable, it's uncomfortable having a 16-year-old daughter and you got to be like, so what's going on with the boy that you like, yeah, it's uncomfortable, but we're parents, right? Like that's what we're supposed to do.
Right. Yeah. That's dope. I think it's important that you said, y'all work for it because I think people struggle with having that conversation about what boundaries are. Like, I know there's a lot of women that, or masculine women that date women who already have kids. And they, like you said, they kind of don't know, what their role is. So I think it's important. Like, did you and your wife have that talk about, okay, this is what I expect from you as far as my kids go type situation?
Yeah. we did. And what's funny is that it took her years to get comfortable in that role. And she would need to be here to say whether she's still 100% comfortable with it or not. But it took her some time because I said you can discipline the kids, like don't hit them or anything like that, but put them in their place and set boundaries around them and let them know the expectation, because relationship is not just about the free fun, right? Expectations and relationship is also about the trust and the predictability, and that includes consequences. But like I said, she's Trini. She's masculine of center, but she's the person in our house who cooks every night, because she believes that kids should have a fresh meal at least once a day. And I'm like working all the time. And so it's not me that does that. So we had to address the gender roles kind of behind that, right? Because if she was the type of person who felt that her identity meant that she should do these type of things, then we might have had a clash. But she's flexible and I'm flexible in those ways. But it has been lots of conversations. And you asked me earlier about if I go to therapy. Everybody in my house goes to therapy. I can't say that I'm a therapist if I don't have that as an expectation. Where we all go to the dentist, we all go to the doctor, we all go to the hairdresser, we all go to the therapist, right? And so we all have our therapy, and it allows us to have more fluidity, and it ensures that we have healthy boundaries and that we're not enmeshed or that we're not too disconnected. But in our couples counseling, because me and my wife do couples counseling also, we talk about some of these things. You know what I mean? Like everything isn't easy, and just because I'm a therapist and I know the way, sometimes it's difficult when you're living it in that moment. And I don't want to counsel my wife, right? I don't want to have to tell her this is how she's supposed to be living. So we have all these conversations, and we talk all the time about challenging things, but it's what keeps us close. It's a form of intimacy to talk about those kind of secrets and stuff.
Yeah, I love that he said everybody in this house going to therapy, because we're not doing that.
Listen, my dog might start getting therapy because he a little, he got some things going on with him.
Right. I think, to any situation, it's just important that, like you said, you be authentic and you can have those conversations, because I know a lot of people, they don't know how to communicate, flat out. And it often comes off aggressive or, not the way that it's supposed to. So I definitely say that that's dope, that everybody going to therapy. Yeah. I'm trying to get my household like that. I called my mom and I was like, so when you want to set up your therapy? It's so important. It's so important. And my last question somebody had was about PTSD. You mentioned, you counsel people in the Army. We got a lot of followers who are in the military, and they might have PTSD or just PTSD from past relationships. And I guess how do you first identify it? And if you don't have that option to go to therapy, what is something you can work on to kind of, get it under control?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a difficult question to answer because um, it oftentimes depends on the type of trauma that you had. Some of the most, and the reality is most Black people have experienced trauma before they became adults. So in their childhood and in their adolescence, they just didn't call it trauma because maybe it was culturally appropriate. So like getting beat, right? Again, from LA, I remember my great grandmother, rest in peace, would be like, "You gonna go out back and get your switch. Go pick your switch so I could pop you with this switch." You know how traumatizing that is to have to go pick the weapon that they gonna use against you? Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Or go get the belt. You know what I mean? Like, who goes and gets the weapon that's gonna be used against them? But that's just one element. Sometimes we experience a lot of emotional abuse in terms of like belittling and aggressive language because that's what our parents thought was the appropriate way because that's what was taught to them and that's what was taught to their parents and their great grandparents and et cetera. So it depends on the type of trauma, but if you're having intrusive thoughts, like you're randomly doing something, you're at peace and then you randomly have this thought that comes in that's negative and that may be related to something in your past, that's one of the ways that you might have some trauma around it. If there's disconnects where you're like arguing with somebody about something, but all of a sudden you're bringing up old stuff, that's another way you could kind of identify if you have some trauma. If you like avoid certain places or certain people or certain things on purpose, or either consciously or subconsciously, that might be one of the ways that you could kind of deal with it. But it really does take at least an intake. You don't have to be in therapy for a long time, but it does at least take an intake for people to identify whether they have PTSD, because trauma is not just what we think it is in terms of physical abuse or sexual abuse or emotional abuse. It could also be a reflection of community violence. It could be a reflection of wars or natural disasters. It could be a reflection of 9/11, which we experienced here. Like it could be a reflection of one of your parents losing their jobs and you guys having a major shift. Like the trauma, it depends on what kind of trauma it is. So it really does help to have an intake, at least one intake, because the therapist is going to ask a series of questions to help identify that. PTSD can only be identified as a diagnosis after the event has passed at least 6 months. So if it's within the 6 months of when the trauma happened, then the disorder is actually called acute stress disorder, which means that from the moment of the event in that first 6 months is when you are susceptible to acute stress disorder. If you could address it in that first 6 months, you're less likely to develop PTSD. So there's acute stress that develops into PTSD. PTSD is a little harder to treat than acute stress disorder is because the intrusive thoughts, because your brain literally shifts. The parts of your brain shuts down in the middle of trauma because it goes into survival mode. And so think about like streets and pathways. There's a block that's there, and that block does not just open back up. Like you got to treat it to get the block open. In terms of what people can do to address it, when they don't have access to a therapist or insurance, I would, at the very least, I would say, get a couple of self-help books that are specifically related to trauma. There's a lot of workbooks, like even Amazon sells workbooks on addressing PTSD and acute stress disorder. So you could go through the workbook. Because it's trauma, I really don't want people to do that work alone though, because when you start bringing up that old trauma in your own mind, if you don't have a way to talk it out or get it out, it just comes back in and it's this cycle. And that's kind of how like the anxiety forms. Anxiety is ruminating thoughts, and you get it out on the workbook, but you need to be able to like talk it out and then physically release it right afterwards, like go out for a walk or for a run or do some push-ups and sit-ups and stuff like that. But I really would like people to at least give us a consult, at least reach out to Onyx or reach out to a therapy group that's nearby to get that evaluation done. And then once they know what type of trauma it is, then it's easier to develop some solutions and some treatment for folks, even if they can't come to therapy.
But like that was my next my last thing. So, are you taking clients? We got a huge fan base in DC. I'm right up the street. I'm in Virginia, so
Hey
how can people contact you or contact your group? If y'all taking clients right now, and that would be a huge help.
Listen, honey, Onyx Therapy Group is 95% Black women, and we are out here doing the work and doing what we feel good with.
Love that.
So, yes, we are accepting new clients. I personally am not. Right now, my leadership team would be mad at me if I had clients. They're like, girl, we can get in touch with you now when we need you. But I have a team of 21 clinicians. And so we're considered a large counseling group. And so we definitely take in new clients. There is a wait list based off of different insurance companies, but that's a whole nother matter. Reach out to us. We can help you figure that part out. Super easy. People could get in contact with us at onyxtherapygroup.com. So www.onyxtherapygroup. We're also on Instagram, and we do tips throughout the week, lots of mental health tips. And that is Onyx Therapy Group. That's on Instagram.
I'll put it in the description.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
And then when people go into our website, they can subscribe to our newsletter. And based off of our newsletter, we have tons of resources that we offer. We change the resources every month based off of what's trending that month. So this month it's about holidays and setting new intentions for the new year. Last month it was about Thanksgiving and gratitude in the communities. And we have lots of work that we're doing in the LGBTQ community, because clearly I am in the community as well as some of my therapists. So the website, Onyx Therapy Group, Instagram, Onyx Therapy Group. Personally, I am Mahogany Sunshine because I think that I'm sunshine, and I'm mahogany. So those are the best ways to kind of get in contact with us, and we're here and we're open, and we can, even if you don't want to work with Onyx, we can also help you find a therapist. You could go to Psychology Today or Therapy for Black Girls. But if you need a little bit more individual support, then you reach out to us too, and we got you too, because that's part of our community work. That's what we do.
Love that. It was so great talking to you. Y'all heard her. The Onyx Group, 95% Black, queer, and in DC. So that's the plug right there.
Oh, but listen, we are beyond DC though. We are in DC, we are in Maryland, we are in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we are in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So we're in 4 different regions doing the work. Yep.
Perfect. So please go to the website. Get y'all mental health in order, because I really want everybody out here to go to therapy. It's a game changer. And I'm so grateful we were able to have this discussion. Thank you for coming on to She Heard Dyke. And y'all go follow Mahogany Sunshine. And that's it. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your time.
You too. Have a good one.
Bye.